This Substack Live is going to be a little bit different from the ones that I usually have. Often those, hello, Patrick, good to see you here. Um, Most of my Substack Lives are conversations with two people, dialogues about creativity and particularly creative courage. And occasionally I go live on my own to talk a little bit more about my work and how people can find me. Hello, Eva, you're joining too. Hello, Inga. Um, Great to have you all here. So today is different because I am here to share with you the insights and reflections from a very special challenge that we had over the weekend, just gone. Hello, Autumn, as well. Good to see you here. I want to start off by welcoming everybody and talking a bit about the challenge and some headline insights, if you like. And I'm really going to invite the people who did the challenge. I can see some of you here now to feel free to chime in with your reflections, with your insights. And even if you didn't do the challenge, if you have any questions or if there's anything that strikes you, I really would love this chat to be able to be interactive and that we can learn from each other and we can have a whole conversation. In an ordinary world, in an ideal world, we'd all be sitting around a table having a conversation. And it's not insignificant that I say that because that's, I think, featured quite a lot in the challenge. So, for those of you who didn't take part in the challenge, who want to know more about it, the challenge was called Design Your Creative House. And the point of it was to really sketch out on paper a vision for how you see your creativity to be. Now, the idea for this, and I won't say too much about this because I've written about it before and I don't want to take up so much time, but the idea came from when I was about 8 years old. I used to sit and sketch houses, imaginary houses that I really wanted to live in. And I loved that so much. It was such a joyful way of being creative. And so there was something in me that really wanted to replicate that sense of joy and play and creativity, but really to use the metaphor of a house to explore our inner creativity. And that's really where this challenge came from. So the invitation was to spend 3 days, not 3 solid days, I must say, but over the course of 3 days to have a journey whereby we would initially like think about and vision our houses and really allow our bodies and our intuition to sketch out what came. And then really to then begin to name the rooms in our house. So what were those rooms and how do those rooms represent our creativity? And which ones brought us alive? We call those the heart space rooms. And which ones did we want to avoid? Maybe they were locked rooms, maybe they were shadowy parts of our houses. So that was the challenge. And then the third and final day, we shared our visions, our floor plans, our reflections. We wrote a description of the houses as if they were being sold by an estate agent, which was an interesting challenge, I think. And then we visited each other's houses. So there was a kind of open house celebration in which we were allowed to peep inside the house to see what had come up for people and to really genuinely share and celebrate and in some cases challenge and question in a really constructive, I think, way. And so that was the challenge in a nutshell. So um, I'm going to pause there and ask if anybody, would like to sort of say something about their experience of the challenge. Autumn saying the open house was magical, and I agree. We were across the world in different continents, and yet there we were, dropping into each other's homes to visit the visions that we'd all had. And Patrick, I agree, it was amazing seeing everyone's shares. Yeah, your intuition brought you to this challenge, and I'm so glad that it did because I think there were lots of riches and lots of things to share. So it was much more connected and collaborative than I had imagined. I was very much hoping that would be the case. It was definitely far more challenging, I think, for people than I imagined. I remember sitting in a bar with Sarah, who is here today. Hello, Sarah, and talking about this challenge. And she said, "Wow, it sounds so much fun, and also how terrifying." And I was like, "Really?" Oh, yes. And of course it's very exposing because we're essentially, showing ourselves, making visible who we are and parts of ourselves. And yet Sarah also says she was blown away by how much fun she was having and, compared to how fearful and unsure. And that is quite a remarkable journey, I have to say, that shift of experience, of a way of being. And I do think that the collective nature of this, the fact that we could visit each other's houses and really support each other and witness each other was very much a part of that, I imagine. And as Autumn says here as well, feeling connected with everyone. I'm glad that you feel the space was brilliant. Yeah, I totally loved it, and it was a particular challenge for me as well. There was another layer of being visible for me, which we'll talk about in a moment. Um, yeah, so that was the headline. When I spoke to a friend of mine, she said, "Oh, it sounds so interesting." She saw my floor plan in Substack Notes and said, "It sounds so interesting. Like, oh, so were there different rooms for different things that you do in your creative life?" And I said, "No, no, no. It was different from that. In that, we were really exploring who we are, you know, on our level of being, if you like. So it wasn't so much you go into this room and you do this certain thing, although sometimes there were aspects of that as well. In a way, the whole challenge was established and set up to be an exploration of our inner spaces. How do we feel by going into that space? How do we feel by maybe contacting some avoidance or resistance around that space? So, although the spaces were real in that they were lived spaces that we could imagine, it was also really an exploration of our inner space and how our creativity shows up for us, how it holds us back, and how we can be supported by it. So, I just wanted to talk about some of the themes that I noticed on on my kind of little walk through the gallery. So yesterday, the third day of the challenge, I opened up the gallery space. And that was a very interesting moment because part of my resistance or fear in terms of creativity is visibility. Part of my house was the terror of being exposed. For example, there was a desk that was in a corridor where everybody could see it was in a communal space. And I have this terror of sitting at the desk and everybody being able to witness my messy process. And in a quite magical way, this actually manifested in real time with this challenge, in that I sat down on the third morning to open up the gallery post and to set it up so that everyone could share the image of their floor plans, and realize that, unlike in Substack Notes, where you can share a picture, you can share an image, this doesn't happen in comments on a post, and I'd set up the whole thing. So I had to very quickly find a workaround, and the amount of fear that came up for me was, oh no, I've got it wrong. People will see that it's I've made a mistake, and actually, in the end, it didn't matter because what happened is we found a workaround. We posted links to notes elsewhere. We made it happen. We had the gallery post, and I'll post the link to the gallery post in the replay to this conversation. What happened was, of course, there was a space in which we all gathered, and from the comments, I can see how connected that everybody felt. Yeah. And as Patrick says, Substack can get hectic. And I thought I'd nailed everything down and everything was watertight. And no, there was this thing that I hadn't seen. And so that was me being with my own particular mess in terms of holding the space around this challenge. And so that was very interesting. Um, some of the themes. So for me, and I'd love to hear from people who did this challenge as well, and see what your take is. I was so surprised by these houses. It was amazing, the sort of, in some cases, unexpected and unconventional shapes that these homes took. So I'm thinking, Patrick, I'm thinking about your 5D air domain place, right? Blew my mind. Like such an incredible metaphor, like a conceptual space that you're trying to put onto paper, which, it's difficult, isn't it? To kind of bring that 5-dimensional spirit, right, to paper through pen and paper. I'm thinking about Inge's hive, the as Inge, as you began to draw your shape, it in its kind of outline space or shape, it looked like a beehive, which actually is fantastic. Hive, it represents community, it represents, kind of collaborative working, it represents connection. So how perfect that, it was kind of like it emerged from the body, from really not trying too hard to nail down an actual vision, but really just to allow the pencil or the pen to kind of create the shape. Um, and like Christine is saying, hello, Christine from Norway as well. I would never been able to imagine the house that you envisaged beforehand. Absolutely. If we'd said, oh, what does your house look like? We might have stayed with the ordinary, the conventional, the familiar. But there was something about this challenge that really, I think, harnessed possibility on the level of being, which kind of blew my mind. I didn't expect that. And it sounds like some of you didn't either. So Christine's was a baobab tree, which was just extraordinary, magical, fairy tale like. It had slides between all of the different rooms, and then she had this platform, a happy space. Your heart space, Christine, was this place where you could dangle your legs as if you were a child and drink your coffee and just be in nature and be contemplative and yet connected to that. So yes, harnessing possibility. And then, Christine, what I loved about your take on it was you realize that you actually have that space in your own home. Okay, it's not a tree, but actually you have a space in your actual home where you can look at trees, but you can enjoy your coffee, and it's a space for contemplation and creative imagination and for being with yourself. And so that, I think, is amazing that you have this sense of possibility on the one hand, this imaginary space, this magical childhood space. And on the other hand, it's actually in your home. And so you're connecting the real with the imagined. And so I would love for you to infuse your real life home, with the extraordinary possibility that your baobab tree brings with it. I just think that's incredible. Yeah, what else? Sarah, I'm going to name check Sarah because Sarah, as she said already in the comments earlier in the conversation, was fearful, was not sure what she was going to encounter, and was really blown away by the experience. So Sarah was amazed to discover that she had a house at all, and that she couldn't possibly have really embarked on this exercise, without, the exercise really gave her a possibility of exploring the possibility of her creative house or her creativity as a house. And so she was, I think, Sarah, you went on an amazing journey, and please drop into the chat if you have more to say on that. I would love to hear more about that. So that was amazing. Um, Something else that I realized and that I hadn't expected was I had imagined, conventional rooms in the home that each of us would design and kind of build in our imaginations, that it would be a kind of locked door. That would be the room that we avoided with the lock on the door. And certainly I've been writing about this for a couple of weeks in my Substack post, and that was how it was in my imagination. But what I realized is that these avoided spaces, the spaces we were resistant to going into for whatever reason, our creativity wasn't fully being actualized in these spaces. It wasn't necessarily a room with a door. So, for example, I talked earlier about my space on a landing, which was a desk that was visible to everybody. There's literally no door on the room. And kind of that was the point, I think, for me, that I was avoiding the visibility of that. I was avoiding people seeing the messy process of my desk. I didn't want that at all. And that's what I was avoiding. Um, Eva, I hope it's okay to name check you. You had an art room at the back of your house with supplies that were collecting dust. So again, not necessarily a room with a lock on it or somewhere we avoid, but maybe a corner of a room that's sort of neglected or not visible or certainly underused, I would say. Similarly for Inge as well. Inge, you had a supply room full of materials that you've collected over the years. And I love how you talked about how you look at them, and you feel that desire to work, but then can't choose. And so you just sort of leave the room empty handed because you're slightly overwhelmed about how that works. Um, so what it made me realize is that the avoidance isn't about a lock on a door. It isn't even necessarily about a door. It's about what we don't want to be witnessed, which for me is a huge piece of this idea of creative courage that I work with so often. Um, the fear of being seen, I feel like this came up for so many of us. Underneath the avoidance was the same fear, like, what if it's not good enough? What if people see my mess, my process, my beginner's state, see me as I really am? I think that came up for almost everyone. Certainly, it came up for me. And even in creating this challenge, it is an act of creativity, lots of avoidance, lots of fear, lots of courage. It took me to put this together and create the space for it to happen, and yet look at the magic that did happen there. So speaking publicly about what we fear is, it's a great act of courage. And for me, Inge's statement was really important. She said, "I'm afraid to begin. Afraid that what I want to make won't be good enough, and that I won't do justice to all those beautiful materials in the art room." And she said this is the first time she'd spoken about it so publicly. And that really touched me. The idea of having this space to name that fear and to harnessing the courage to be able to name it was just magnificent. So well done, Inge, for that. And well done for everybody. I mean, the very fact that you're willing to share your designs on Substack and all of your vulnerable kind of feelings about, what that brings up is remarkable, really. It's really incredible to me to see this happen in a digital space where we're sort of in different time zones as well. So people on the west coast of the US, all the way through to South Africa. So the time zones were huge, and yet there we were, kind of collected and gathered. And I think that's remarkable. Um, yeah. So I think that it's about courage and about connectivity, and really how being in connection can be something it can't get rid of the fear, but it can be an antidote, I think, to some of those big fears that hold us back, I feel. So the mess is what connects us, I feel. The messiness, the vulnerability, the sharing. Um, and then it creates openness, I feel. So many of us, there were open spaces in our homes. Eva had a wonderful open kitchen where she was going to welcome people to eat and to sample her delicious cooking and to gather and to share and to chat. Autumn actually blew me away as well, in that her home was a van, and she shared with us that she's had this vision of van life, for a very long time. And so she drew her home as a van. And her van is always open, even when it's closed. The doors are always open, even when they're closed. And part of her van was a tent that she'd never opened before. So a space for play and for pleasure and for exploration. And I love that so much. I feel like this challenge has been an opportunity for all of us to play. And even though it's kind of scary to name the parts that we don't want people to see, actually overall it's just so much fun to dip into that vision and to share that's really our inner lives, our inner creative lives. Um, and as Autumn also said, doing is the art. And I completely agree that there's something about this process. The focus of this challenge was very much on process. We weren't there to draw beautifully designed or beautiful kind of perfect paintings or drawings. We were there to sketch and to share what's on the inside. And so it wasn't a design challenge for artists, for visual artists. It was really about doing. And so that, I think, was what was really remarkable about this, that the willingness to share process, I thought was just wonderful. What else? What else? I'm going to talk about Gillian. Gillian's house. Gillian's house is a home with no clocks, and I absolutely love this. This idea of that we're out of time when we're in our creative space. The clocks are banned from this home, which was just wonderful. There were two outside rooms with no doors or windows, and she was kind of worried at first. Was she shutting herself out of her own creative life? But over the weekend came to trust, and I felt like this weekend, this journey for most people was a stepping into greater trust. I really saw that. And I was really celebrating everybody for that, trusting what was there, trusting the waiting as well. So for Gillian, the room that she named as her heart room, the place that is most alive for her, is a room of great patience, where there's no deadline. There's not the penalty of deadline, but it's waiting for something authentic to be made, which I just think is really beautiful. And I think it's a reminder that the creative life doesn't respond to urgency. We can't rush this process. It responds to authenticity and sincerity. Yeah. And Gillian saying, I greatly value the trust, and thank you for that. And me too. I feel like everyone was on this journey of trust. So, the last thing I want to say about themes that arrived, um, is about the connectedness and the heart space. So I think every one of us pretty much had some space or other where there was a gathering space. And some of us, I think, had different relationships with that gathering space. We recognized the need and the desire to have a gathering space where we could welcome people in and connect. Um, and yes, I agree, Autumn, we created a neighborhood of intentional community. Absolutely, we did. Yeah, and I love that too. But for some people, they needed also space for solitude and contemplation. And we had Hannah, who shared with us like a kind of ecosystem of her spaces that actually, gave her a space apart that was connected still to the collective and collaborative spaces of the rest of her home. Also, we had Eva, who talked about a room for contemplation as well as connection. And so I feel like there's a very holistic sort of theme beginning to emerge here. There's a van that's open to welcome others, but that the doors can close. In my case, there was a huge table where guests can eat and create and share. And then there was also a snug where you could just cozy up with a book and, be away from the central hub of the home. And so the studios weren't solitary. And I think there's so much in our culture that talks about artistry as a solitary pursuit, that we almost have to do it alone. And something that really emerged for me from this challenge was this real richness that comes from the sense of connectedness, from welcoming in others, from being able to name where perhaps we feel vulnerable and to actually have that witnessed and shared and supported. So we drew spaces for connection. And as Autumn says, a neighborhood of intentional community and international community as well. So that was wonderful. And for those of you who did complete the challenge, there will be another opportunity to meet. I'm going to create an opportunity for us to meet on Zoom for those of you who can make it, so that we can see each other's faces across time and space, and we can actually, explore a little bit more about what came up for the on the challenge, and have more time to contemplate and to reflect and to share. So watch out for that. That will be coming, and I will send details of that. Yeah, it's great. Yes, yeah. I felt like a Substack Live wasn't quite enough. I wanted to offer another space, another layer of connection in this challenge. So that's coming. If you don't already know, it's going to be Sunday, the 8th of March. And so, yeah, I'll send details of that to those of you who took part. And then also, all of this work of courage and creativity and exploration of our inner creativity, our inner being, not just the doing of creativity, but who we are on the inside. This is very much the way that I work in my community as well. So my community is called the Creative Courage Circle, and you can ask me about that and find out more about that on Substack. This is how I love to work, because I feel like we need to explore the inner self with all of that brings, the light, the shadow. We need to explore that in order to then provide the strong foundations for the doing, I think. So yeah, there's that. And so finally, I don't want to keep us very long on this Substack Live. I really want to just half an hour or so to celebrate and to gather and to share some insights, but also to name the prize winners as well, because I offered at the very beginning of this process a couple of opportunities for prizes for people to kind of, yeah, really just to provide some motivation. But really, I feel like the way that people show up with this work requires both creativity, and it requires community, and it requires courage. And I wanted to recognize those things. Um, I do feel it was so hard. It was so hard when I was walking through the gallery post today and reflecting on everyone's shares and everyone's interactions with each other. I do feel like a beautiful gathering was made, and part of me was like, I don't actually want to allocate prizes because everyone deserves prizes. And I hope that for everyone who took part, the taking part was enough of a prize, if you like, or enough of a reward, or enough of an opportunity to, yeah, to kind of have some insight that you can take away that will sustain you on your creative journeys beyond this challenge. I also think that the Zoom gathering will be, I hope, a real gift to people too. But that said, I'm going to keep to my promise. And so I'm going to announce the winners of the prizes here today. And I will be in touch with prize winners as well to provide more details. But just to say, drum roll, the prize for the most vulnerable share. This was really tricky because I feel like everybody shared vulnerably, and I couldn't award everybody. But for me, it was Inge van der Graaf, your share about naming something public for the first time you've spoken about your fear of being afraid, of not being good enough, and not being up to, using those beautiful materials. For me, that was a beautiful moment. It really landed for me. So I want to thank you so much. I think it was a gift to all of us that you named that. So you're the winner of the most vulnerable share. And then the next prize was for the best neighbor, and this was really designed to support the collective nature of this. So visiting each other's houses and noticing what was there and witnessing and supporting. This was a really, really, really close run thing, and so I've decided to create a kind of separate category, which is a kind of honourable mention for this category. And that goes to Autumn Day. You were so generous and warm and supportive in your showing up and your comments and the way that you reacted and responded to people's sharing and reflections. So I'm going to be in touch with you. I'm creating a special prize for you as a kind of honourable mention, as the very, very close runner-up to that best neighbour prize. I feel like, honestly, everyone was a best neighbour. It's so hard. So I'll be in touch with you, Autumn. But thank you for your generosity and your openness and your support of everybody on this challenge. And so that leads me to the winner of the prize for Best Neighbour, goes to Gillian. Gillian, you visited lots of houses. You left very specific comments. I mean, lots of people did. I loved how everyone was so specific in what they saw and names. But I feel like Gillian really made people feel witnessed. And I think, that is the thing. So it's not just showing up and being supportive and warm. That's important too. But I felt that people were really seen by your showing up and your responses. So that kind of noticing and kind of, leaving a comment, leaving a question for people to be able to reflect and to ponder, that's a real gift. And so I just wanted to yeah, acknowledge that really. It's very generous. It's a particular kind of generosity. So, as I say, it was incredibly hard to choose those winners. But there we are, there we have it. And I hope that on the Zoom, if you can come, people who did the challenge, then there'll be more acknowledgement and I suppose, yeah, more reflection and more sharing, which I hope will be valuable as well. So, for everyone who took part, well, first of all, thank you to everyone coming on this live. Like, even if you didn't take part, I hope it's given you a sense of this challenge and what it was designed to do, and the responses and the experiences that people had. But I, I want to really thank the people who showed up full-hearted, wholehearted, with all of their creativity and their courage. Like, everybody was a winner in my view. And I can see Hannah's just joined us as well. Hello, Hannah. Really good to have you with us because what you shared was beautiful as well. So really wonderful to see you here. I feel that the houses now belong to you. You've sketched them, you've reflected on them, you've worked out, you've done an inventory of the rooms and what they represent to you. The rooms are now yours. And my biggest hope is that you take those rooms and that you use them to explore further your creativity. And that perhaps you can certainly enjoy the heart room, enjoy the expansive possibilities that brings, but that also the spaces you avoid, maybe the rooms that you avoid, also feel maybe just a little tiny bit less scary than they were, and that you have more courage perhaps to stand on the threshold or near to that space, and that you're more able to be with it, whatever that is, and that you're more willing to explore and to kind of go there with, yeah, being in that space and creating from that space too. So thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. It was such a delight. It was kind of exhilarating and a little bit exhausting. I feel like my whole weekend was there holding space, and it was so, so worth it because I feel like something extraordinary was produced genuinely. So I may well do it again. And if you're watching this video and you're watching it as a replay and you're interested and curious, get in touch with me. Please let me know because I would love to offer this again. And I think even if you've done it once, there's definitely scope to explore even further. The rooms in the home or the rooms in the house are endless, I think. There's more and more and more to explore. So, yeah, I think that's it for now. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you again on Substack, on the stacks, as we say, at some point in the future. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for taking part. And I will be in touch. Have a brilliant rest of the day, and I will see you all soon.